Hi, I'm Spencer Krause. I've been building robots for over 20 years. In that time, I've seen a lot of interesting things, and I've heard a lot of interesting stories. Collaborative with Spencer Krause is a place where my peers and I can relax, have a drink, and talk about some of the crazier things we've seen at work and some of the experiences we've had that have gotten us to where we are today. Subscribe today to join the collaboration. Welcome to the Collaborative Podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Krause. Our guest today is Torrey Smith. Torrey is the CEO of Endiatx, a company that makes a swallowable pill bot that's an alternative to an endoscope. Torrey, welcome to the pod. Very nice.
Hey, thank you so much, Spencer. It's an honor to be here.
Honor to have you, buddy. I was really happy to meet you at Robo Business this year when you came up to me in the crowd and said you were a fan of the podcast. It made me really happy. And then when I found out that you were going to be swallowing one of those pill bots for the closing keynote, I was doubly happy because that was the best keynote I've ever seen.
You know, one of the cool things about, I guess, the community that we're in is you get to meet your heroes. And I remember, I don't know if it was like 18 months ago or 12 months ago. It was something between 1 and 2 years ago. I was watching your podcast while I was taking apart a tiny electric motor and reverse engineering it in SolidWorks. And I ended up just, going for a few hours, kind of listening to you and a guest. I think it was Nick Armstrong speaking. And it was just kind of cool because I just felt like it was kind of like you, me, and Nick in the middle of the night when I was listening and watching the podcast, and my Mitutoyo calipers, right?
Nice.
And
I got those as well.
I was just like in that flow state where things were kind of working, and I just wanted to follow that because, usually when you get into one of those good little moments, you want to see where it can lead you.
Yeah, for sure. No, I'm really happy to hear that the podcast was able to help you achieve that flow state in some small way. I'm sure you would have gotten there anyway. But that's sometimes when I'm doing like a mundane task like that, like when I was painting this logo on the wall that you can barely see behind me, I think I listened to 14 hours of podcasts and just up on the wall with a paintbrush. I listened to Hello from the Magic Tavern. So,
oh, that's awesome.
Sci-fi action adventure podcast.
Something that I've been trying to track down the exact quote, but something that a lot of engineers love is the Vitruvian Man sketch by Leonardo da Vinci. And it's just so cool, right? There's power in that imagery. And at one point I started to ask myself, well, okay, who's the Vitruvian Man? What's that all about? And so I'm Googling, and, according to my research, Vitruvius was a famous Roman architect. And he's got this book on architecture, and it's about 2,000 years old. And so I'm thinking, hey, I should see if, you can get a copy on Amazon. Sure enough, you couldn't. The thing that I loved was the very first page of the book basically goes into how in the time of Vitruvius, when they were building Rome, a lot of the great buildings that we all revere today, there wasn't as much of a distinction made between artists, engineers, builders, architects. You were all kind of expected to identify as artists. And so when I learned that you've been, painting and, creating the world that you live in and making it beautiful, and you're also an amazing engineer out in the world, I'm not actually surprised, right? But it kind of gives me that twinkle in the eye.
That's nice of you to say. Similar, right? I have a lot of respect for your work. I mentioned the swallowable pill, but the Tesla coil that you showed me also, and some plans of yours that you told me about that I don't know if you want me to say, so I won't. But you've got some amazing designs and aspirations and accomplishments yourself, and I'm quite happy to be talking to you, sir.
Well, it's kind of cool to live in a community where people are ultimately encouraged to do awesome things, right? Like Silicon Valley is one place like that, but you have amazing ecosystems all over the world where it's actually kind of legal and encouraged for someone with a crazy idea to get up on a stage and pitch it. And, better still if you're holding some kind of prototype in your hand when you do it.
Oh, yeah. No, I do appreciate the pep talk you gave me and the other Tension Dynamics founders the other week, kind of to that end.
Well, I'm actually kind of a huge fan of making things move, right? I mean, that's like one of the most exhilarating experiences, is when you're a kid and you get a bike or some rollerblades or a skateboard, maybe a dirt bike, who knows, go-kart. Moving through space and time is inherently fun. And the fact that you guys are creating this totally new way to actuate mechanisms, to push, to pull, is interesting to me because, nodding on a little reference earlier, I'm interested in large scale robotics for fun and other reasons. And, you guys have come up with a new way to actuate things. And so it's really exciting because every time, we get a new way to do stuff out in the engineering world, it's kind of like another star is born because all these new opportunities pop into being. For us, a lot of opportunities have been popping into being, coming out of the world of advanced lithium batteries.
Sure.
Thanks to that world, the options that we have as engineers designing robotic pills, those are expanding, and we're starting to ask ourselves questions like, "Holy cow!" We might be able to make the robot a little bit smaller, or maybe we could give it some more capabilities. Maybe this is what takes us in the direction of the surgical version of this bot. So it's just really cool. But your team is opening up possibilities for engineers all over the world. So thank you for that.
Thank you for your work as well. What are some of the other advancements that have kind of unlocked, I guess, new possibilities for Endiatx? So you mentioned
I
lithium
think
batteries.
I think lithium's a big deal, right? Like, and that's quite a stallion to wrangle, right? There's nothing trivial about the lithium chemistry that's out there, but thanks to its adoption in places like airplanes and cars, and on modern rockets. I mean, actually, Rocket Lab, for the longest time with the Electron engine, was actually using, and still is using, lithium batteries to run the turbo pump on their rocket engine, right?
That's
So
pretty
instead
cool.
of having like a gas cycle, it's electrically driven turbo pumps, and they just drop the battery packs in segments as they run out of juice. Um, it's just really interesting to see how the creative landscape has expanded thanks to lithium tech going so far. And so, I guess the question is, what's going to happen next? To be honest, I spent about maybe like 45 minutes today just trying to add as many nuclear engineers as possible on LinkedIn at local programs and like over at MIT. I'm working my way on LinkedIn over to MIT right now, just because, okay, you have to ask yourself, if lithium is opening up the possibilities right now, what is 10 or 100 or 1,000 times crazier than lithium? What should be on the horizon? And gosh, the nuclear beta voltaics, nuclear gamma voltaics are
Wait,
actually
is that a thing? Like nuclear batteries?
right. So like in simple terms, right, a voltaic circuit is, a solar panel, gets hit by a photon, and if the band gap is matched to the solar panel, bam, you can take a photon and convert that into some electricity. Well, similarly, that's just one form of electromagnetic radiation. And there are other forms of electromagnetic radiation, especially, beta particles, gamma particles. And so there's a whole field that goes back many decades into nuclear batteries. And I'm not talking about like radioisotope thermoelectric generators, like what's powering Voyager, right? This is not like a heat-based thing just from
Yeah, you can only make that, my understanding is, as small as like 7 kilograms before it stops working.
well, and plus I'm
I
not
could
sure
be
some of
wrong
them.
on that, but that's just a number I got for a project a while ago.
I'm not sure, I'm going to be able to get a glowing red hot chunk of plutonium inside a person as a way to power my little bot, right?
That's reasonable, I suppose.
But with the nuclear voltaic side, it's actually a little bit different, where you just take all the radiation and you turn that into electricity, and any extra radiation you just absorb in basically the shield, which is basically the little solar panel, if you will. And so these things, they don't really emit radiation per se, at least not the beta ones. Um, the only problem though is the power density is pretty low, right? That right now, if you look at nuclear batteries, there's like, you can get them physically small, but you're talking like microwatts of power. And I'm just curious though, because I recently started reading articles about people going from the beta particle side of things to gamma. And when you go into gamma, things get a lot more spicy, if you will.
I'm sure in more
But,
ways than one, I would imagine.
but the thing is, people are starting to post results in scientific papers that say they're getting like 3 orders of magnitude more power density compared to the old, beta route. And you're like, well, hold on, that's starting
Quite a
to
bit.
sound that's that's really
It's like
starting to sound
1,000.
like something that could be feasible for engineers like you and me.
Did you know that Collaborative with Spencer Krause now has a merch store? Please go to cwskmerch.com for the latest in CWSK styles. You can get a hoodie, like the one I'm wearing, t-shirts, hell, we even have whiskey glasses. Everything in the store has custom art that our team worked really, really hard on, so go ahead and show your support for them, me, and the rest of the CWSK team by going to cwskmerch.com today. Better yet, support yourself and use discount code PODCAST10, all one word, all uppercase, for 10% off your entire order. Thanks for your support and enjoy the rest of the show. Collaborative with Spencer Krause is sponsored by SKA Robotics. If you're in the market for elite field robotics expertise, please consider hiring SKA Robotics. They sponsor this podcast and solve some of the toughest engineering problems in the world. SKA Robotics can be found at skarobotics.com. Wait, so if you could get microwatts with a beta voltaic, does that mean that with a gamma voltaic you can get milliwatts? So it's still
Maybe
not that
milli,
much,
right?
but it's getting closer is what you're saying.
Yeah, my big sort of philosophical debate that I have with myself when I'm walking around the building, stuff like that, is just, can we go beyond Pillbot? Like right now, we're just in the hardcore execution phase on basically driving drones around inside the human stomach. Drink some water and pilot a drone. Maybe you give a gastroenterologist a video game instead of an endoscope. And we think that's a great idea for a company. And so here we are. The question, though, is, what do we do with that as our foundation? And so obviously, we do want to add capability. We want to add surgical tools, right? Maybe lab on chip. That's how Pillbot goes from Pillbot to Pill Surgeon. But still, we're talking about swimming around in the stomach or maybe going a little further into the GI tract to do other work. How do you leave the GI tract, right? Well, if you want to go from the stomach as your operating arena and you want to go through a blood vessel, or you want to crawl through interstitial layers of tissue to go everywhere in the body, right? You're slowly working your way around. It's going to have to be a lot smaller, right? The thing that's the size of a huge fingertip might need to be the size of a grain of rice. And so what kind of power source would work at that scale? And, because of the tyranny of the square cube law, when you change the size of something, things change exponentially and not always in a good way, right?
You're
And
talking
so
about the amount of friction and resistance your motors are up against at that point, or
friction and resistance, or the relative amount of energy that a battery would be able to carry with it at that new scale, it's way worse. And so we're kind of in a place where right now lithium batteries have recently just kind of entered the realm of possibility to make Pillbot work at this big, fingertip scale. It's very far from working at a rice grain size scale. So maybe there's a new type of energy source or power source, and maybe that could be a nuclear battery, right?
Cool.
And maybe it's not something that, if it's milliwatt, and that might be very aspirational even, maybe it's not sustained power, where it's operating continuously, but maybe it's a little bot that sleeps for 23 hours and then crawls around for 1 hour, something like that.
you're charging a capacitor for those peaks or something.
And then maybe you do have a little lithium battery in there that, can soak it up, dump it out really fast with a capacitor to help to, alleviate the peaks. Maybe it would be some cool hybrid, right? But I'm just kind of here because I think the concept of tiny surgical robots that can, fight cancer where cancer started, right? Like, go find it before you'd ever, feel it. Go fight it with a crazy little robotic surgeon that, you can inject or let it crawl to the location. I think that's awesome. And it's just tech like that is going to be earned through hard fought victories, right? And one of them will be power. Another would certainly be miniaturization, all
Sure.
that
I
good
mean, I
stuff.
would think if you're injecting into blood vessels too, just being able to visualize things, through blood is going to be a challenge. I mean, I know in arthroscopies, like being able to flush with saline was a big, kind of breakthrough there.
Sure. Like I spent 9 years, really good, proud years, designing this catheter.
Oh,
This is the
cool.
Phoenix atherectomy system, and it's basically a roto-rooter for arteries.
That's awesome.
You slide it into someone's femoral artery. That's like a super highway. You can go down into the legs, or you could go up, towards the heart if you wanted to. And you basically get it into the femoral, and then in our case, we would go down into the leg, and the lower extremities, all the way into the feet sometimes, and we would cut plaque and basically remove blockages.
Cool.
And what I'm kind of thinking is, you do that in a hospital on a patient who's fully sedated, right, with a doctor manipulating the tool. So obviously, how do you automate that? How do you go to the next level? And there are companies who are saying, well, maybe instead of the doctor's hands, strap a robot to the patient's leg that can roll a catheter and advance it forward and backward. And all of a sudden, you can roboticize what a doctor is, twisting and poking and rotating, right?
Oh, interesting. So you don't have to have a pill bot necessarily. It could be a robotic catheter.
Well, and this is what's being done right now is people saying, hey, replace the physician's hands with robotic actuator wheels. And then you still have the catheter, but you don't have to have all this clunky handheld control stuff. That's a huge leap forward, right? Because then it's very much scalable. You don't have to have like one-to-one doctor interaction. But for us, we're asking ourselves, like, how do you go further than that? How do you get just the tip of that catheter in the human body? And that's kind of where we go to, like, okay, we need rice grain size microsurgeons. And so we're really ambitiously, chasing after our childhood dreams of nanobots, molecular size machines. That's
I believe you quoted Feynman in your keynote, which I really liked to that point.
Plenty of room at the bottom, so swallow the surgeon, right? That was deliberate. So I consider nanobots, personally, to be beyond my personal capacity to actually go create a product and take that to market. It doesn't mean we won't do that, but my guess is it's not going to be me. So my question is, what can my team, what can we work on today that becomes a real product and helps to improve someone's life? Well, Pillbot, for sure. Pillbot is today. We're doing that right now. So where are we going to try to go? Well, pill surgeon, and then maybe that microsurgeon. I think rice grain size should be my sort of like get old plan. It's like, if I need to squeeze out a bunch of white hair, what could I do that on? And I'm thinking micro, right? Like if I just want to like burn and like push 10, 20 years through my body, right? For what would I do that? And I'm thinking, I would love to see this tech go beyond the stomach. And I think if we have custom silicon within ASIC, if we have MEMS, the microscopic mechanisms, right? And we have an exotic form of power, I think you'll have kind of the holy trinity of enabling tech necessary to go to rice grain size. And so while molecular size is still way off from at least what I can visualize realistically, rice grain size, there kind of aren't any real hard constraints saying don't do that.
Well, if you're willing to spend 20 years, I mean, there's so much you can accomplish, right? It's like that old adage, like, give me enough time and money and I'll send a person to the moon.
Well, and I only say that kind of length of time because sometimes things take time. But I also say that having added like 50 nuclear engineers on LinkedIn today, and one of them accepted so far, which is very nice. Thank you, Rebecca. But the whole idea is I would like to go to rice grain size. How do I do it? Well, we need ASIC, we need MEMS, and we need placeholder name is nuclear battery, right? Who knows what? Maybe it's a fuel cell. Maybe it's reacting chemicals with stuff already in the body. Who knows, right? But
Maybe you've
we'll
got
need
some kind
some.
of a charging system. Yeah, it could be a lot of different things.
We've done a lot of wireless R&D here at the company, and
You can't get it without proximity.
well, we've wrapped our heads in copper coils that we wound. We've wrapped our torsos, and we actually went as far with wireless power, just on the experimental side back in 2019, maybe 2020, 2019 timeframe. Was we made an 11-part Delrin mold so that we could custom mold epoxy mixed with ferrite powder. So we were basically making our own ferrite cores with interesting shapes so that you could wind 3 orthogonal winds around them to basically
Huh.
make a wireless power receiver.
That's wild.
And so we basically took our lithium coin cell and we said, okay, what if we took the volume of a lithium coin cell, which is like X number of millimeters diameter length, right? Can we make a wireless power receiver within the form factor of our
So you've
current
tried this
battery?
already. Okay, that's wild.
Well, and here's where like sometimes you pick up a signal and you're like, oh damn, that's too hard. I'm gonna do something else. We made power. We transmitted power to that, but it was about 3 orders of magnitude less than we felt like we needed. And so here's the hilarious irony is for that reason we're like, we're not going to do that right now. But then recently we saw the nuclear beta to nuclear gamma route gain 3 orders of magnitude, at least in headlines. And you realize, let some brilliant PhD cross that chasm, right? So it's funny, right? Like we very much steered away from that because we had pretty limited resources, and so we were chewing on other things where it was like, oh, this is more of a 10-to-1 thing. We can make it. We can cross a 10-to-1 chasm right here using resources on hand. But when it was like 1,000-to-1, we're like, you know what? If we have alternatives, let's use an alternative. So I think zooming out a little bit, I would like to participate in the sort of micro robotic telemedicine revolution where our contribution are little tiny robots that can move under their own power. Um, I don't want to throw any shade at wireless power or at external magnetic actuation, either of capsules, which is being done, or of soft robotics like tentacle snakes that are externally magnetically actuated. There's like really cool work being done on that, including clinical work. But our particular flavor over here is little robots that move under their own power. It's just there's sort of like a cool factor to it that kind of aligns us as a team and just kind of provides the fuel to go do the hard things. And for us, we just love being able to throw them into a fish tank or swallow them and see them actually take flight. It still kind of fills you with that sense of childlike wonder, and that's kind of the fire within the startup company.
That's awesome. I mean, it seems like, certain people are particularly motivated by just cool problems to solve and interesting work. And so it's good to know you found that driving force for your team at Endiatx.
I like to say thank goodness for the human stomach, because it provides almost like a playground, if you will, like a safe enclosed environment to begin an adventure, where things are easier than they are outside of the stomach. The stomach is a place where the size is a little bit less of a concern. It's a place where you can drink some water and you have a nearly 100% water environment. You get some mucus and some junk floating around, but largely, the stomach is like this entry level playground inside the human body where you can do things, and those things are easier than they would be elsewhere. And so, yeah, we're going to begin in the stomach, but the adventure is to go beyond.
So I have a dumb question that I feel like only an engineer would ask, but how do you have any ideas for how you're going to navigate, like in blood vessels, if you nail the power and compute miniaturization requirements on the grain of rice size?
Honestly, I think it might be harder to go through arteries and veins than to actually cruise around in the brain.
Oh,
Like,
interesting.
in the brain, you basically just like, snip, 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 push, push, push kind of thing. And you're very much in a lesser evil kind of environment, because anytime you're disturbing brain tissue, that's non-trivial, right? But our friends over in Paris at Robote, that's a Bertrand Duplat's company, along with Joanna Cartocci, they're doing this right now. I think they're in mice right now. But they're making little robots that sort of manipulate their way through brain tissue, right?
Wow.
And their research right now suggests that there's some trauma, but it's not a huge amount of trauma. And compared to the other way that you would be gaining access to that location in the brain, like a surgical cut down, it's actually potentially a lot less trauma. And so it's kind of like this concept of like ultra low invasiveness, to get to a
Yeah, if you've
gnarly.
got to be in there anyway, you're going to have to push some neurons out of the way. So may as well
Yeah. Yeah.
do
So
less damage.
maybe it's like the tissue tract a needle strike might leave. Maybe, who knows what size of needle. So yeah, that's the weird thing, is I almost think like a little creepy crawly might do better in the brain than it might do in a blood vessel. Not that we don't want to go to blood vessels, but just I want to kind of give respect to something that kind of, it doesn't really keep me up at night, just because we're so focused on Pillbot in the stomach right now. We know it will be hard, so I'm not going to be, I'm not going to let that freak me out. That's a future challenge. But yeah, like in arterial situation, the advantage is you're tending to go downstream, which means like unless you're in the carotids heading up to the brain, that's pretty scary.
I would
Let's say you're
imagine,
in
yeah.
the legs and you're headed to the feet. That's an area where your worst case scenario, like you're out of control, you embolize, you get stuck somewhere. It's bad. It's bad, but it's not like directly kill you right there bad.
And if somebody knows where you're at, you could cut it out with a scalpel, like if you really had
Yeah.
to. Like there's things
Or
you
some kind of a
send in a
device, kind of like
catheter
what you
and,
used to make,
you know,
right?
yeah.
With veins, you have this other thing going, which is with veins, you have this low pressure blood that's leaking through all these capillaries into the veins. It's way less like punchy, fun flow. So maybe it's less chaotic. Maybe it's a little bit more swimmable. But the new problem is you have a series of gates, right? Veins have little flapper valves in them every couple of centimeters or so, because you don't have a lot of pressure returning that blood to the heart. And so you have these cool little valves that hang out, allowing something to pulse through, but then it comes and stops, so that you don't get a ton of backflow. And then the next pressure wave comes up and you can sort of maybe advance your way up to the next one. But for a robot that would go in there, you'd have to be dealing with those and, understanding that they're there, that you probably don't want to cut your way through. You probably want to pass through deliberately. But then is it even possible to go contra to the flow in a venous situation? Maybe.
I mean, probably, but like I would imagine challenging.
So totally non-trivial, right? None of this is trivial, but I think that once things become mechanically, physically possible to the world of engineers, and we start prototyping things, if we have a lot of friends in the medical community, and all of us have friends and family that have experienced, the latest standard of care, over time, I think you do start to see possibilities. So thank goodness for the stomach, right? Because we can do this now here. We can start to experiment and plan and have ambitions to go beyond. And then we can kind of pick, okay, what's our next beachhead after the stomach? Probably somewhere in the GI tract, right? Like something I get interested in is pancreatic cancer. So you've got the GI tract. It's kind of like super highway going through the body. And like any super highway, it has a couple of feeders that join it. And so just past the stomach, you have the small intestine. But the first segment of the small intestine is called the duodenum, or I think the Brits or Aussies say like duodenum. And it's just, it's like the first bulb of small intestine. And I see it a lot because I swallow a lot of pill bots, and so I'm like very familiar with what my duodenum looks like. In the duodenum, you have the entryway point from the bile duct, and so it's a much smaller lumen. It's not like it's just like here's an easy clean hole that's obviously the bile duct. I mean, it's theoretically it's kind of hidden and hard to see. Like I have not seen my bile duct with Pillbot yet and been like, that's it, there it is right there. I haven't had that experience. But let's say we did. Let's say Pillbot is becoming a stable platform and you are able to navigate it directly into the duodenum, maybe like hold still, I don't know, put some arms out or suck your way in place. I mean, there are various ways that you might hang out there. What if you could use Pillbot as a platform to advance a very small microcatheter up the bile duct?
Oh, interesting.
Right, like theoretically.
Why would you want to do that?
Well, let's try to go save Steve Jobs or someone in the pancreatic cancer population.
That originates from within the biliary duct.
Right. The bile duct will take you up to the pancreas.
I didn't realize that. Okay. I got to reread Netters or something. Thanks.
So if we could advance a microcatheter up the bile duct, could it sniff for biomarkers and get like a really strong, pungent biomarker signal that there was something wrong? Because rather than collecting a biomarker signal in the toilet or the large intestine or the small intestine, you're actually collecting that sample like really close to the source. And maybe that helps you pass a threshold where, boom, you can catch something years before you would otherwise catch it. Or maybe it's just a tiny little camera. And those, thank goodness, those actually definitely exist. We use those all the time. Maybe you could have a tiny camera at the tip of your little microcatheter and see, maybe there's a lesion inside that tiny little tube. Or maybe or put a phased ultrasound array around that camera tip and see through the tissue a little bit and look for irregularities like little lumps. Because targeted ultrasound can be nice, when you're really physically close to the object you're trying to look through. You get like really good accuracy and like really good detail from that proximity. And also you kind of know where you are because you're like going up the bile duct. So the question is, can we use technology like Pillbot and what follows to, at a population level, capture and diagnose illnesses at earlier stages, right? Could your stage 4 stomach cancer diagnosis, which is a really bad thing to get, could that at the population level turn into a stage 1 diagnosis? And all of a sudden, could the oncology community get all of these early screening results and just have like all these other options? And would that be good for patients? And we tend to think, yeah, that would probably be awesome. So what exactly will we do going up the bile duct? I don't know, but it's a new area that we would like to go explore. If we can get Pillbot, safe, effective, used hundreds of millions of times all over the world. If we can show that little swimming robot eyeballs are good in one part of the body, probably we can use that as a foundation to go do other things.
Awesome. Yeah, I feel like for that you definitely want the autonomy like running smoothly at that point. Just if the bile duct is that evasive that you haven't seen it after how many Pillbots have you swallowed now?
I don't feel like I should show them right now. You wouldn't be able to tell, but like I just don't want to be vulgar. 73. I recently had my 72nd and 73rd Pillbot doing a transit, and maybe I'll make it to 100 and quit or something. I don't know. It's not trivial to test your tech on yourself, but there is a kind of a long tradition of doctors and founders doing some self-tests. Right. It's a little bit of a legal gray area, but generally speaking, a little bit of self-testing.
Rather pharmaceutical engineers, I should say. Yeah.
To some extent that can be okay. I think right now though, we are growing so quickly as a company and as an organization. You're definitely going to see us um, either growing with the new roles that we need to fill, or get out of the way, right? So we are very much having to say thank you to Silicon Valley for embracing us as a seed stage company, and putting us in this awesome facility in Hayward. This has been awesome.
Oh, Hayward's
Now,
great.
just like we graduated from the garage phase to seed stage phase, and we had to go through a huge amount of growth, psychological, personal growth, professional growth. Now, as we enter the Series A phase, it's like you have to put on your Series A face and become that version of yourself based on your podcast, based on the people that you bring on. What I love about your audience and your vision and your community is that I think you kind of position yourself really well in the crossfire, the intellectual crossfire of the engineering world, right? So you could be a core like tech generator creator at a company that has a mission, and you can be super proud of what you do. And you could be watching, Collaborative with Spencer Krause while you're working through a crazy project late at night. And that's a totally appropriate, scenario. You might also have some crazy ideas in your head, but based on your audience and your guests, people who are exposed to your dialogue, are going to be getting encouragement to consider launching a company, right? And that doesn't mean torpedoing your current employer. Like, your boss may very well be your first angel investor, right? And so,
Or a
what I love,
customer.
absolutely, it could be a customer. So I love the community of engineers and creators that, get cool ideas, sketch them on napkins, go into the shop, build the thing, call up their friends. For me, it involved a lot of team building, because I started to work on things that just, although I'm a enthusiastic fan of many of these, parts of the tech stack, certainly wasn't the expert. A lot of the stuff that we do today for Pillbot is stuff that I never ever would have thought that I would be able to be competent in as a core content creator. So instead, I had to go make friends with people that were really passionate in those areas, and then see if we were all interested in collaborating, right? In kind of getting cross-functional. And so I'm not, a software engineer. I'm not an electrical engineer, but I'm super proud to be able to sit in on conversations where people are deciding, you know what, we're actually going to rewrite this in a different language. And here's why. Here's why that's relevant in the Pillbot world. Or, we've been doing all this on the FPGA. We could actually do a lot of this on the microcontroller, and that would make it so much easier to program. But if you actually want to understand why we've done so much on the FPGA, check this out. This one chip has been carrying this heavy load for us in this way that you might not actually realize. It's fascinating when you can get a bunch of people with interesting skill sets to open up in a way where they can just be totally vulnerable and just get cross-functional and collaborative, and not feel like they're being judged or that it's a competition to be the top dog, right? Like, I don't think anyone at this company right now is walking around just like thinking, yeah, I'm like the best at the thing, and hear me more roar and give me the respect, right? You peons. It's more like we're all kind of walking around being like, wow, I have some really cool friends, and I'm really glad they're willing to work with me on this kind of stuff. Once in a while, you're going to interact with someone that's not fully bought into the kind of professionalism concept, where we try to make each other all feel safe. We try to take care of each other, and then see what kind of awesome things we can do together. Like that, to me, that's what it means to be professional. Sometimes people aren't going to be quite there yet, and that might not even be a crime. It might be part of, they might grow into that later. And then, it is typically a pretty small community in the sense that, if you choose to, be super nice to people, that spreads around and people kind of want to work with you. So that is really it's a decision you can make of, do you spill the beans or not? And yeah, you might lose a deal or a client, or you might have some of your work borrowed at some point. But I've found that if you can let people get credit where credit is due, that that little bit of affirmation, like, hey, I respect you. Thank you for coming up with that idea. That goes a really long way, right? For example, I get really sad if we can't name everyone on the patent who touched it, right? Like to me, the patent is like the ultimate way to just give credit to someone for having contributed to some really awesome creative thinking, that's expanding the technological landscape. And so I love to see, interns, employees, people who are early on at the company get their name on a patent. That always means a lot to me because, well, it meant a lot to me when it first happened. When when I saw my name on a patent, I called it my mom. I was like, Mom, like, she's like, that's amazing. Are you wealthy now? I'm like, well, it doesn't quite work that
I don't know
way.
if my mom even knows if I'm on that I'm on patents. Like, I think I've just never told her.
Well, it's such a cool little thing. And
for sure,
and,
no, it's great. It makes you feel good.
right. And so similarly, like sometimes I'll be working on a project with a number of people, and we'll sort of collectively come up with a new idea. But I like to try to steer the credit for the new idea towards someone who is part of it. They may very well have dreamt the thing up, right? In which case you got to. But the more credit you can steer towards someone, the more that person is likely to just be bit by the bug to just run with it, right? That might encourage them to come up with a bunch of other new ideas, right? If they realize that they can be commended for their creativity and their willingness to turn an idea into a prototype, into a test report, into a new part of the product. Like that's how you get leaders, and not just like organizational, operational leaders, but it's how you get creative leaders. But I'm just to kind of sum it up, I'm super proud and honored to kind of have connected with you in person the way that we did.
Yeah,
It's
likewise.
like it's neat when you can literally see one of your heroes out in public and run up and be like, dude, I watched every one of your episodes. I love what you do.
That's really nice.
I'm hoping that we can keep that energy moving forward, right? So for anyone who's watching right now, please hit us up, hit me up on LinkedIn. If you're thinking about launching a company, if you're trying to get it, if you're trying to fundraise for your idea, like this is a community where we try to help each other out. So as long as you have something that you're passionate about, I would love to hear about it. Just thank you for your time.
Thanks, Torrey. I appreciate you coming on. You're my hero too. Thank you for your time as well. Looking forward to the next one. Take care. Thanks for joining us today. If you've made it this far, chances are you'll like other episodes too. Collaborative with Spencer Krause is available on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Pocket Casts, and Radio Public. Subscribe today to get notified when the latest episodes release and support the channel. Collaborative with Spencer Krause is sponsored by SKA Robotics. If you're in the market for elite field robotics expertise, please consider hiring SKA Robotics. They sponsor this podcast and solve some of the toughest engineering problems in the world. SKA Robotics can be found at skarobotics.com. Thanks again, and see you on the next one.